Hey guys, welcome back to the Abundant Life Vlog. This is Ryan Moore here. Just wanted to share with you today about how we can trust the Bible. And so there's probably a lot of questions out there of, why do people believe it or trust in its truth? And so I want to address that today. We're probably not going to be able to cover everything in one session, maybe not even two. So it'll be a multiple part session. But today I want to just answer some basic questions that people tend to have. The first one is this. If it was written so long ago, why would we listen to it? And first of all, I want to say, think about this. If something was just written yesterday, and someone put out there this really heavy truth about the world and what it means to live and even go to heaven, or be in right relationship with God or each other, and it's literally only been out for a day. How much validity can you give to that if there hasn't even been people who have adopted that value system or understood those truths and began to live them out to see if they actually work in practice? And so I think actually the fact that the Bible is written, thousands of years ago gives it more validity, because what we've seen over the course of time is that millions of people have adopted and understood its values and began to walk with God based on the truth revealed through the scriptures, and has provided hope, love, satisfaction, direction for people over the centuries. And so the fact that it was written long ago and still bears truth today actually speaks to its validity and the fact that it's true. And so the second question I often get was, hey, how can you trust the Bible if it's just written by men? I mean, people wrote this down, people are flawed. How can you trust it? And that's a valid point. People are flawed. So let's talk about, what does the Bible say about itself? In 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17, it says this: all scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. All scripture is God-breathed. And what does that mean? Some translations say inspired by God. And the idea is that God directed its revelation as He revealed Himself to people along the way, sometimes physically in the form of Jesus and His life and the things He said and did and people that wrote it down. Other times inspiring people to write the things they do in order to convey the things that God has been doing or communicating to His people. And so what we understand is that God is sovereign. He is in control. And so because He is able to speak and create all of the world and the heavens and the stars, because He's able to walk on water and heal the sick and do all these amazing things, He is God. We believe that God is sovereign, is able to direct the revelation that's been given to us so that we can understand who God is and what He's about and what it means for us to follow Him. And so the fact that it's written by men actually, to me, again, gives it a little more validity. God often uses people to carry out His purposes. He guided that process. People were writing down the things that they saw and the things they saw God doing. It wasn't like God presented Luke with scrolls that are already written by the finger of God and said, okay, now start passing these around. He chose instead to have Luke go and, as a historian, interview the people who were there and saw what happened with Jesus and experienced the things that He did and write them down, and for that to be preserved for us so that we can see accurately who God is and what it means for us to follow Him. And so there are some other groups that have their own scriptures out there, other religious groups that claim that God just gave it to them directly. And to me, personally, that's a little more suspicious because you have one person claiming that God himself gave them all of this information to relay to the world. Whereas the Bible actually has 66 different books, many different authors, but all having one overarching theme, and that is that God is the God of all creation, that he loves us, he made us, that we have rebelled against him and sinned, and because of that have broken our relationship off with God, and because of his great love for us, he sent his son Jesus to die on the cross to pay that price for us and then be raised to life. And so throughout the timeline of the scriptures, the Old Testament begins to lay out this need, this idea of man is broken and fallen and sinful, has rebelled against God and has a need, and then the payment for that sin ultimately in Jesus. And you see foreshadowing of the coming of Messiah throughout the Old Testament. And of course, after Jesus comes, all of the rest of the Bible points back to that event. So all of it kind of hinges together on the coming of Christ and his sacrifice for us. And so you have this, although many books, many different authors, all with the same overarching theme of God's love for us and our need for him. And so, to me, again, that gives more validity because there are so many authors, but still pointing to the same truth. The third thing is that many people will say, well, hey, hasn't the Bible been translated like 1,000 times? How can you trust it? It keeps being translated over and over and over again. And I think, honestly, there's just a misconception of what that means, of how the Bible is actually translated. Some people believe that it was translated from its original language to a language, let's just say German, and then translated to another language like French from that German, and then another language to something else, and then even in English, it was translated into this Old English version of the King James, and then people came along later and said, oh, this is too hard to understand, we're going to translate it to modern English, so we're going to look at the English version of the King James and translate it into a more modern English. And that actually is not what happens. That's not a true translation. You see, what happens in the course of translating the Bible is that there are scholars who know and understand the original languages of the scriptures. The original language of the Old Testament is Hebrew and some Aramaic, and then in the New Testament is Greek, or Koine Greek. And so, for example, in the New Testament, the New International Version for the Bible, there's 70 different scholars who come together and work together at translating the original language. And of course, when they're doing that, they're translating it into the current language. They're not translating from the original language into, the language of 500 years ago, but instead to the current language, which then again makes it more easy for us to understand because we recognize and understand the language of our current day. And so, translation, it's not changed over time. In fact, we'll talk about this more next week. They have found in all of the original texts that as they keep finding even new texts over time, it lines up so completely with the previous text that they found. There's less than 1% difference. We'll talk again more about that next time. And so the point is that translations aren't translated to this language, to this language, to this language. Then certainly it can lose meaning and understanding if it had been done that way. But that's not how it's done. We actually go back to the original language and understand the context of that culture and that language, and then are able to translate that into modern, for example, English, so that we can understand it. So anyway, that's how translations work, and why we believe that we can really trust the translations that we have. So there's many more things to talk about in terms of the Bible and how we understand it. Next week we're going to talk about kind of three main historicity tests for literature and how the Bible stacks up to that. And so come back next week, check in with us. It'll be great. I hope you'll check that out. Thank you so much for watching, and liking this vlog. We appreciate you being a part of this. Please share it with others. And again, love you guys. Thanks for being a part of this. Talk to you soon.